I work in an adult oncology unit where the harsh reality of death is a constant companion. The majority of our patients are on comfort care, living out their final days in the hospital. The air is heavy with the weight of impending loss, and the halls echo with the soft sobs of loved ones saying their goodbyes. We experience the most deaths in the hospital in our unit, and many floating nurses avoid working on our floor due to the high number of fatalities. But for us, it's different. We form deep connections with our patients, and the love and care we provide serve as a source of comfort during their final days. As we navigate the ebb and flow of life and death, we've noticed a strange pattern. Death seems to come in threes. For weeks, there will be no fatalities. Everyone either makes it home or to hospice care, and we breathe a sigh of relief. Then, without warning, we'll experience a week or two where we see a steady stream of patients passing away. Always 3 or 6 deaths within days, usually only minutes or hours apart. A few months back, we had a particularly difficult week. We lost 2 of our beloved patients in one night. One of them, a dear old lady, had been in room 8 for an extended period. We had grown attached to her, watching as her once spry body slowly wasted away before our eyes. Her passing was a hard blow for everyone on the floor. She passed away during the night, and by the next day, a new patient was placed in her room. As difficult as it is, we understand that patients come and go, and we have to move on. I was doing the admission for the new patient, going over room orientation. I explained that she had a one-stop shop remote, which controlled the lights, TV, radio, and had the call light. As I finished explaining, I placed the remote back on the holder on the wall next to her bed. Instantly, the TV turned on by itself and began flipping through channels at an alarming rate, faster than if you were just holding down the channel button. The new patient, an older woman thankfully not paying much attention, thought I was the one controlling it, but no one was touching the remote. She said, "No, thank you. I don't want to watch TV right now." I reached for the remote to turn it off, but it wouldn't respond. I started to panic and yanked the remote from the wall, telling her it seemed to be malfunctioning and that I would get her a new one. Even after unplugging the remote, the TV wouldn't turn off. Normally, everything would stop functioning if the remote wasn't connected properly. I ended up walking over to the TV and manually turning it off. Feeling uneasy, I left the room and told the patient I'd be right back with a replacement. As I made my way to the nurse's desk to grab another remote, I ran into another nurse who was also there to grab one. It struck me as odd because we had just received a new shipment, and they were typically very reliable. I asked if her remote was broken too, and she said hers was also acting up. I asked which room she had been in, and she mentioned another room where a patient had passed away the night before. The TV remotes were malfunctioning across the wing, specifically in the rooms where patients had died the previous night. It was as if the spirits of the deceased were still lingering, their presence somehow affecting the electronics in the room. The eerie atmosphere of the floor now carried a supernatural edge, and I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I began to wonder if the spirits of the patients who had passed were still present, trying to communicate with us in their own way. The thought sent shivers down my spine as I walked the hospital corridors, unable to rid myself of the growing sense of unease. Before we move on to the next story, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something similar? If so, please share your experience in the comments section. I read all your comments and try to reply to everyone. Additionally, I will feature some of your experiences in my next videos. For about a year, my mother worked at a long-term care facility for senior citizens. She took the overnight shift, doing a lot of laundry during the sleeping hours, catching up on patient notes, and attending to any room alarms. In the mornings, she would help residents with dressing and grooming. There was a female patient, whom we'll call Mary, who was the oldest person on the floor, a centenarian at the age of 102. She couldn't walk and, as to be expected, required assistance to stand, dress, and use the toilet. However, she had a sharp mind and regularly amused the staff and visitors with her snappy comebacks and wry observations, often peppered with bits of sage wisdom gathered over the course of a century of life. She wasn't what one would consider a dementia sufferer, not even in the early stages. To put it in my mother's words, Mary was still with it. Which is what made this little occurrence all the more unnerving. One night, my mother was working with another nurse. The residents were all in bed, and the floor was dark. The layout of the floor consisted of a central nursing hub with 3 offshoot hallways, each lined on both sides with residence rooms. The other nurse was at the end of one of these hallways, folding and putting away laundry into a cabinet. At the hub, my mother was working on notes when the light-up switchboard for the room call buttons flashed a single red light, and then it went off. That was strange because, as my mother explained, the lights weren't supposed to go out without a nurse entering the room and switching it off on the wall, which was certainly out of the bedridden resident's reach. Shrugging it off as a possible malfunction in the room button, my mother got up and walked to the room in question, which happened to be Mary's room. Just as she was about to push open the door, she heard a clear but soft-spoken lady's voice say, "Mary." My mom told me it sounded like someone was right behind her, as clear as day. Thinking it was the other nurse, my mom turned, but there was nobody there. She could see the nurse still busy with laundry straight down the opposite hallway. Now, feeling a bit jumpy, my mom did a quick look around, trying to find who had said Mary's name. There was no one, not a soul walking around. Shaking her head and thinking she must have been hearing things, maybe from a resident's TV, she pushed open Mary's door. Mary was awake and, hearing the door, raised her head. In a hopeful voice, she said, "Mama." This jarred my mother a bit, as Mary hadn't shown any signs of confusion before. She always recognized where she was and who was around her. But my mom reassured her, saying it was just her, the nurse, and asked if she needed anything. Mary looked sad, but shook her head no. My mother then arranged the blankets and left the room, returning to the hub. When morning came, my mother began her rounds. When she opened Mary's door, expecting some sarcastic comment about how long she'd taken to get there was only silence. Mary had passed away. My mother has since said that it's common for the elderly to revert to an almost childlike state right before their death, with many calling out for their mothers. "Maybe?" Mary's mom answered. The eerie feeling from that night stayed with my mother for quite a long time. The strange voice calling Mary's name and the sudden malfunction of the switchboard. It all seemed too coincidental. Whatever the case may be, the memory of that night would stay with her forever. If you find these stories chilling, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more gripping tales. Share your story in the comments below. I love to hear your experiences. Stay safe, and thanks for watching.